Joining us now, Chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Republican Congressman Ed Royce of California. Good to have you on board.
Mr. Chairman, always great to have you.
Chairman, good to see you. Let's talk about Iran and let's talk about Saudi Arabia as they relate to one another. First of all, do you have concerns about the execution just a couple of days ago of 47 people in Saudi Arabia?
Well, we do have concerns, of course, about the way this was carried out. But at the same time, we also have concerns with Iran calling for the overthrow of the government in Saudi Arabia, as well as attempts to overthrow the government in Bahrain and, frankly, the effective overthrow of the government in Yemen in terms of the Quds Forces operations in Yemen. So the entire instability there, I think, is a problem as Sunni and Shia begin to separate into separate blocks, and it makes it much more difficult. And this is part of the fallacy in leading from behind. We see a lack of leadership, and as a consequence, you see that people don't listen to us now in the region. They perceive we tilted towards Iran, and this has created problems in terms of our credibility in the region.
What could this lead to as you see it? This conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia, if it grows, if it gets bigger, what happens next?
Well, my concern is, well, first of all, Syria, the consequences there in terms of trying to broker any kind of an agreement at a time when Iran feels that they've been empowered. If you see the actions of Iran recently, whether it's taking an additional U.S. hostage or whether it's, violating the UN sanctions, shooting off these ballistic missiles, and remember, Jordan and other U.S. allies in the region don't see a reaction from this administration. As a matter of fact, the administration was about to take action, and as soon as Iran pushed back in terms of enforcement on the sanctions, the UN sanctions, all of that evaporated. And so we need a policy of backbone, not backing down. And as a consequence of that constantly backing down in the face of Iran, I think there's this perception now that it will make it much harder to get people to the table, because instead what you see is a reaction of them lashing out in what way they perceive they can against Iran's growing hegemony in the region.
You're obviously critic of a lot of aspects of the administration. The U.S.-Saudi relationship is in a different and worse place than it's been in our lifetime. I'm wondering, again, leave the American administration aside for a minute, what aspects of Saudi behavior do you think have contributed to a deterioration in the relationship?
In terms of Saudi behavior, I think the long-term problem has been the support of Deobandi schools. Not just in the Middle East, but in Pakistan, there are about 600 schools that we're trying to get closed down. And Gulf state money, not from the government, but from powerful families in Saudi Arabia, continue to support that kind of education.
The government turned a blind eye to that?
That's our problem. We believe the government hasn't done enough. But at the same time, you have
But the government has made progress, though, right? The Saudi government has made progress in this area over the past several years.
This is true, but the 600 schools in Pakistan still get the funding somehow from individuals in the Gulf states. And in Saudi Arabia, in that region of the world, we still have a problem of money funding coming to Nigeria, North Africa.
At the same time, though, so we had this discussion a couple of hours ago on this show. The show, by the way, goes for like 18 hours. A couple hours ago, I think Mike Barnacle said, doesn't it make sense for our long-term bet to be on Iran instead of Saudi Arabia?
That's the administration's bet.
But yeah, it is. But yeah. You are a Saudi. You see Saudis like me as our allies. Troubled at times, but compared to Iran, this isn't a close call.
But let me explain. The chance to change the Middle East was in 2009 when the people in Iran went to the streets.
Right.
And the administration made the decision at that point not to support the people in the streets in Iran. Instead, they've gone forward to engage the Ayatollah. By the way,
at the same time, he was saying Mubarak, our ally for 30 years, must go.
At the same time, the administration was perceived as supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, right?
Right.
The Muslim Brotherhood was getting its funding from Iran. So the perception in the region is that we're tilting to Iran. This is what has helped destabilize, along with our failure to push back against Iran or enforce the sanctions that I just spoke of. They've launched these ballistic missiles, which are obviously a threat to the other countries in the region besides ultimately to us. And our failure to push back on that has been duly noted. So the main problem in the region is Iranian power and growing influence and their chance of death to America, death to Israel.
Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ed Royce, thank you for being on the show this morning.
Mr. Chairman, come back.
Thank you.
Boring times for you.